You found us through fly fishing. You'll stay for our passion and the community. Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing podcast.
Yeah, but he doesn't get it. How come fly fishermen don't get it?
You only haul with the short power snap.
Look for where people walk and the insides of bends and hunt those.
The roof flew off and the interior walls got sucked out and the trees are just coming up. And I mean, he's clearly not going to clear the trees.
It is not a fly fishing story. It's a story about me trying to understand my brother through fly fishing.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
We've been waiting for you. Follow our guests, follow us on Instagram, and share this episode and the love if you enjoy this podcast. And we are live in 3, 2, 1. How you guys doing?
We are doing just great. Thank you.
Yeah, doing excellent. Looking back at another awesome season of fishing.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk to you guys about this because we're kind of coming into ending the season, getting ready to think about wintertime, and I want to hear how it went for you. Northern Rockies Adventures is this place. I've watched some videos. I haven't been up there yet, but I hope to. But it's this remote wilderness lodge. You guys have these float planes, which are amazing and huge. I want to dig into all that. Before we get into all the fishing, Daniel and everything there, I want to hear from your dad maybe the story, because I don't even know, but I'm guessing he founded this lodge or was a big part of getting it started. So, Urs, do you want to give us start us off how you got into this lodge?
I would love to, yes. My wife and I, Marianne, we are originally from Switzerland, as you probably can tell from my accent. And I have the flying bug, and we came to Canada in 1979 and started the air service in 1981 in Fort Liard in the Northwest Territories in northern Canada, just about 100 miles to the northeast of where we live now on the Alaska Highway in Muncho Lake Provincial Park. And over the years, being a bush pilot, flying the natives, the trappers, the hunters, the fishermen to their favorite lakes and streams in the area, I got to know all the secrets of fishing within a 200-mile radius of Muncho Lake. It's an amazing area. The area drains north into the Arctic Ocean, unlike the rest of BC, which drains into the Pacific. That's also why we have a completely different fish population. We have all native wild fish up here, from rainbow trouts to walleyes to Arctic graylings to bull trout, northern pike, and lake trout. It's just a great variety of species.
Wow, that's amazing. So basically you were a bush pilot going, and at some point you said, hey, I know this water so well, I'm going to create a lodge. Did you actually build the entire lodge, or did you buy that, or how'd that work?
We had the opportunity to purchase a small lodge on the Alaska Highway, which was serving the traffic traveling up to Alaska and the Yukon. And then we expanded that and built a new building. Well, it's not new anymore. It's 25 years ago. And we managed to develop it to one of the major stopping points for travelers driving up to Alaska. But it also serves as an excellent jumping off point to get into the backcountry, which is only accessible by float plane. We have to remember the Alaska Highway is the only road up there which basically rises through a unspoiled wilderness, the unspoiled wilderness of the Northern Rocky Mountains. And as soon as you want to get off that road, there's no surface transportation really available. You do need the float planes to access those streams and the mountain lakes.
Gotcha. And what was the lake, or as you mentioned the name of the lake, maybe you guys can describe, is there one big lake? Is there a bunch of lakes out there? What's that look like?
Well, northern BC, the Northern Rocky Mountains, they have lots and lots of small mountain lakes and streams. Now, Muncho Lake itself, where we are located, is a 7-mile-long lake. It's very deep. It's 400 feet. It's one of the biggest natural lakes of the Northern Rockies. It has various feeder streams, a major outlet. It's excellent for grayling fishing, bull trout and Rocky Mountain whitefish. But it's our base to fly into the backcountry, to those smaller mountain lakes, which give us access to the streams where the fly fishermen can fish the untouched waters of northern BC. And the easiest way to get up here is really by flying with our packages out of Vancouver. We operate our own King Air 300 to take people up conveniently to northern BC from Vancouver.
Yeah, I think, it's what it's kind of about is, when you're traveling this far and you want to see, remote fishing, people just want to get right off the road, right? Once you're on a highway, roadside access, all of those lakes, they've been fished for 40, 50 years, and it's nothing like in the lower 48. They're more prolific fisheries than that off the highway, but the true gem of the Rockies is where no one else has access to, and you only get there with a float plane.
Gotcha. And what? How do you spell that name? What the lake, the Muncho? How do you spell that?
Yeah, Muncho, spelled Muncho, and it's actually a native word, First Nations. It means I think big or deep in the Kaska language. It is a massive lake. It's 350 to 370 feet deep in some spots. It's pretty fascinating. I grew up on the shores of that lake, and it never ceases to surprise me.
And what is the river that flows into it, comes out of that big lake?
Yeah, well, I mean that's a fitting name for a river going into it. It's the Trout River.
Oh, it's the Trout River. Nice.
Yeah, so there you go. What's in the Trout River? Funny enough, though, mainly grayling. The fishery, the fish that we see the most of up there everywhere is pretty much the Arctic grayling, which is kind of funny. It's an exotic everywhere else. It's under pressure. And I was talking to some biologists about it, and they basically summed it up really nicely for me. The first fish to disappear when a system is under pressure is the grayling. They're an indicator species. They thrive on crystal clear waters. They need pristine habitat, and we have that in abundance.
That's right. Wow, this is so cool. Yeah, and you guys are literally right at the base. I mean, you're right in the Rockies. You're in the Northern Rockies. Like if you look behind you, well, in any way, you got giant mountains around you. Is that the case at the lodge?
There's no more Rockies after us. We're the tip of the iceberg. We're the heart of the Rockies, I like to call it. From there, the Rockies stretch all the way down to New Mexico.
Yeah, to New Mexico. Wow, this is awesome. So I've been up in BC. It's one of my favorite places. I will definitely go there more and more. And I was just back to the Schildknecht this year. And so I know you're close by. I don't know how close you are, but give us a little rundown for people that don't know BC. Like if we just want to Google something or find you, how would you describe it?
We're the top northeastern corner of BC. So we're right below the Yukon border. Our fishery is totally different because of that. We have the Rockies, we have the Cassiar Mountains that feed into the Schildknecht, of course. But then we also have the interior plateau that is kind of like Alberta fishery. That's why we have the walleye fishing. So we're right at the top of the province, and our fishing area is roughly 10% of BC. It's some 40,000 odd square miles at least.
Wow.
It's pretty massive.
Now you're saying out of all of British Columbia, your area that you cover is 10% of it?
10% of it. Yeah, it's
Wow.
huge. And the majority of that is lakes, but the lakes all feed into rivers and streams. So you can multiply that by a good factor of 3 for the fisheries. And, as everyone knows, how many pools you have along a river or, a nice little run here and there, man, we've got countless, little fishing holes all over. And yeah, that's why we have that variety, right? It's just, we can really dial it in.
Right. That's why you have pretty much everything up there, all these species, because it's pretty diverse, right? I mean, you don't have, the one thing you don't have is the salmon, right? That's kind of the one thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's something you think about. People are like, oh man, but I wish I could just catch a salmon on this trip. I'm like, well, you can do a lot of salmon fishing in BC, but what's nice about this with the salmon not in our system, I find it's a little bit of a blessing, especially for the fly fishermen. If you want to use those traditional nymphing patterns, those dry flies, and not swing eggs all day, go somewhere where the salmon ain't. It's just kind of the nature of it. When there's salmon in the system, and everything kind of revolves around them. You have that up in Alaska too. So we use a lot of dry flies. Our go-to, like our biggest hatch is probably a caddis hatch, kind of in end of July into early August. And man, you can fish caddis all the way up until I was out on a spot I was scouting out until October. Like it was crazy. And yeah, I mean the mayflies do really well too. but I think that the caddis might just be a touch hardier or something in our region. And just the mayfly hatch is short, it's intense, but the caddis is prolonged, and it's always a really good pattern.
Right, caddis, exactly. And do you guys have, well, we talked a little species, but maybe talk about that a little bit. Do the rundown but what are
Yeah, no, we call them the fishing grand slam of the Canadian Rockies. And that, 6 trophy species, freshwater only. That's going to be the lake trout, the bull trout, the, of course, the rainbow trout, and then, the grayling, the Arctic grayling in there, the pike, the walleye. Like, there's a lot to cover, but it's so awesome because with this massive fishing area, we can really, they all have seasons, and with the elevation in the season, we can really hone in on the perfect fishing spot.
Yep. And people that are coming up there, they're kind of picking and choosing like, hey, which species but there is a chance to get a number of them on the same trip, right?
Oh yeah, you can catch, you can catch yourself a grand slam pretty easily. Like, you'll go to a spot and you can catch, 3 species of trout, get an IGFA record. Like, you can join a grand slam club on a trip like this officially. It's pretty cool. And yeah, you have a lot of multi-species days. Some of the minor species I don't talk about, the Rocky Mountain whitefish, we catch those all the time too. You just don't really guide as much for them, but they're there. We have the burbot. That's for fly fishermen. That'd be a chore to get into one of those. They're deep and tricky. And I did mention I'm chasing a little bit of an Inconnu up there, but they're migratory in our area, so it's not really something we really guide with unless I crack the code really good.
Okay, and now what is this I'm not familiar with the Inconnu. What is this?
It's a species that really exists kind of in the higher Arctic watersheds. You see it a bit in Alaska. It's an interesting fish. It's kind of considered tarpon of the north. It has like a tarpon-like mouth, and what's fascinating for a lot of anglers is they grow very quickly. So within the first 2 years, they're well over like 3 feet or so. So they mature very quick, and they're a very aggressive fighter. But they do sit deeper in the water column. They're a little bit rare. And Inconnu is actually derived from a French word from the explorers up here in northern Canada. They asked the natives, "Well, what's that fish?" And they didn't really get an answer, so they interpreted it as Inconnu, which actually just meant I don't know. Like unknown. So yeah, my languages are probably a little bit mixed up in there, but that's roughly how the way the story goes. Yeah,
it's Inconnu.
Yeah.
And it looks a little like it does look a little like a walleye, but the mouth looks just like a tarpon mouth.
And they're big and slender. So yeah, it's an interesting fish. It's been a little bit of my hobby pastime trying to chase them down, but they sit pretty low in the water column in rivers. So it's an interesting one.
Wow, this is good. We're adding a species to the list. This is really cool. So, well, and Brandon talked a little bit about just the experience, saying that, this trip is one of the best he's ever, I think he said it's the best he's been on, but describe again, just the area, it's mountainous, this thing, anything else you want to leave people with before, we kind of hit the next topic here?
Yeah, I mean, topography wise, like, you need to think of what you see kind of in the Schildknecht that leads into it. This is that mountain range that silhouettes the back of that. That's the Cassiar Mountains that we go right into the Cassiar Mountains. We go over the Rocky Mountain Trench, which is a massive flat area extending right down to New Mexico border, I believe. And then, of course, we are at the tip of the Rockies, heart of the Rockies. It's the end of the chain. So we fish all of that and then some. So the Spatsizi and a lot of popular kind of areas, we have this massive management area called the Muskwa-Kachika. These are all encompassed in this fishing region that we do. So that's hence the variety, right?
Good. So that's a little setting the stage for what you guys have going. Maybe we could talk a little bit about just the maybe the seasons of what you have going. You're coming off a season, so you have, and I know your season isn't huge, but let's talk about that. See, like species, kind of times to go up there.
Yeah, let's talk some seasons. I think the seasons are always, that's fishing's all about seasons. In a place like this, there's a season where it's just through the ice, and that really is a kickoff for our fishing season when the ice comes off. It's usually the third week in May there, I think. But it's a very interesting time because there's a lot of species that spawn around then. The northern pike are very close to the ice out for a spawn, and as are the grayling actually. So it's an interesting time for fishing. It's incredibly aggressive for the lake trout that are on the top water, the walleye, and even the pike that just after spawn are probably feeding up. It's June is kind of when we start our fishing trips for that reason. The May one, it's just early mid May. It's just, you know what? Most of the spots are still iced up.
Yeah,
Like
right.
our summer is 2 intense months, and our fall is probably a month, and then that's it. So basically a 3-month fishing season.
Yeah. So June, July, August are the prime, and a little bit in September.
Exactly, right into mid-September, and there's some good fishing to be had, and we'll talk a little bit about my scouting missions. But the thing is, mid-September the weather turns. You can start getting snow. It's the fishing may be good, but it's probably not the best time to be up. At 4,000
Yeah.
feet up in the Rockies with freezing water.
This is awesome. All right, and I want to go to the planes because I've never been on a float plane. I've been on some helicopters and stuff, but I'm excited about someday getting on these. So, Ors, you I'm guessing you were the bush plane, so you probably taught Daniel about flying this. Maybe talk about those planes, how they're different, how they're unique, and then talk about what it was like when Daniel first got into the cockpit and flying. Like, how did he learn? Did you teach him step by step?
Yes, that's a great question. The airplanes we operate on floats are the Havilland turbine single otter. It has 9 passenger seats. It's a great float plane. It's probably the best float plane you can get to fly around in the mountains. It has a 750 horsepower turboprop, a modern engine on it, and that gets us in and out of those small mountain lakes to access the streams and the area rivers. And the second airplane we operate is a Cessna Caravan, and again, that airplane is specially equipped for our operations. We have that Black Hawk turbine conversion, which also offers 200 horsepower more than the stock airplane. The airplane is even on amphibious floats. And Daniel has been flying both of those airplanes together with his brother Michael, and we are flying together in the summer months to take our guests to those remote lakes and streams in the backcountry.
Yeah. And was it hard for you when you first got going? I always joke, I've said this before, we had John Gierach on. He talked about his experience in a float plane and things like that. I always thought it was like, it's kind of a loose cannon. You never know who you're going to get flying your plane. But I don't think that's the way it is. Like, did you guys go through a training, when before, or did you just learn on the job? How did you learn, or like to do it?
Yeah, I basically got taught from some old bush pilots. But, our operation is somewhat different. We do not really employ any other pilots flying the float planes. We just do it all ourselves. I have been doing it all by myself over the last several years, and with Daniel and Michael coming on, so we don't really have hired hands. So you always fly with the experienced people at our operation.
I think, Dad, there's a lot of flying kind of fishing out there in places, but there isn't many flying fishing guide bush pilots. And that's I think where Dad always was. He loves to fish. He loves to fly the float planes, and he doesn't really want to give either up to anybody. So he just wants to be out there with the planes. And we always kind of did that personal connection with our guests and all those stories. We wanted to be right there with them. So me and my brother, we were, I think, always with Dad right hand. I think my first float plane takeoff, I was, at the ripe age of 10. Of course,
oh, wow.
He was on board, but I was with Dad, and he wanted to show me the ropes of it. And I didn't know at the time if aviation was for me, but we grew up like that, and it's so nice to be doing this now, in the family business together.
What was yours, Danny? What was that like with you? I mean, I'm not sure how that worked. Was your dad like, hey, you're in the cockpit, you're the passengers, like, take the wheel? Like, what was that first time like for you? Do you remember that? Were you that young?
Oh, I was younger when I was in the cockpit already. I think I probably was in the cockpit before I can remember being in the cockpit. I know that there was a little headset lying around us cleaning out, I think, a closet once, and my mom said, oh yeah, that's your little baby flying headset.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah, we grew up like that. Me and my brother, we would go to school on the ski plane, and that's that's what, childhood was. The planes were different back then. We had, piston airplanes, beavers, and smaller Cessnas. But I really do like these turbine ones. They have a lot of power. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, they're big.
Yeah.
They're big. You have no worry about carrying gear. It's always like we've talked about some float trips around Alaska, and it's always like, oh, well, there's a limited, right? You got to do multiple trips just to get your gear in there because.
Yeah, and you get stuck in the woods and all sorts of stuff. Like, I remember, back in the day, it could happen that Dad was out fishing and, he would be able to fly the clients out, but then he'd have to stay at a cabin overnight just because the weather turned and those smaller planes are maybe a bit slower too, and you get stuck in the weather more. So we really like I think we've got probably what we figure like the Cadillac with float plane fleets. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, it looks like it. Pretty comfortable. Well, let's take it to that float plane. So if somebody is, again, they're coming up, they're flying in, you got that all set up, they land at the main lodge. And then from there, talk about that. Do you typically hop in on a daily and then hop out to some other lake, and depending on what people want to fish for?
I mean, that's exactly it. That's the trip in a nutshell. You come on up from Vancouver. We take care of all the transport from the big city here, and it's all inclusive from there. What we do is we really kind of try to gauge kind of what people are looking to fish well before they show up at the lodge. We look at the seasons and the target species, and then on the day by day we have over 70 different destinations we fly to. So we really dial it in on what's productive right now. We use elevation, we use the seasons to really drive that target species right into the fly of choice for our guests.
Yeah. Okay. And I keep thinking about the Brendan Morrison because we had a podcast with him. He's a famous hockey player, which is really cool. I'm not, obviously you guys are in Canada, so you have the hockey in your blood. I don't have it as much, but it was really interesting hearing because he was a great hockey player. We talked about that story, but he also did a video, and we'll put a link to the show notes up to your lodge, and he had a really great trip. Talk about that. When Brendan went up there, what time was he going? Maybe describe his trip a little bit and how, they had a great time up there.
Well, he did 2 trips with us, and, I think most of the time Dad was actually fishing with him too. They were up there actually in July, and his first trip he came up, I think it was a little bit later in the season, and he was kind of targeting a little bit more like lake trout and stuff. And then he really, really fell in love with the grayling fishing up there. So when he came back, he just wanted to go for one of our outpost cabins, particularly the one at Frog River. And he just loved it there. They got some beautiful footage. They're, filleting grayling. He's got an awesome little video there on that too. And then he went out, for a couple of days of flying fishing with Dad as well. I think they went for rainbow trout. They just had an absolute blast. And I think Brandon's still talking to trips up there, and we'd love to see him back. I think he's actually planning to join us on this chat here today, so it'd be cool to hear him too.
Yeah, so my name is Brendan Morrison. I'm the host of the fishing show called Real West Coast. Former NHL hockey player for 14 years. We had a passion of chasing a rubber puck on some ice for a long, long period of my life. And now that passion's kind of transitioned to being outdoors and being on the water and chasing fish. Well, if you could just close your eyes and picture the most magical destination in the world with towering mountain peaks, virgin water, a lot of untouched lakes, just clean mountain air, big trees. And on top of that, you go to fish areas that have rarely been touched by an angler. I mean, it's the ultimate. It really is. I've been very fortunate. I've been up there twice now, filmed 4 episodes up there, and the fishing is absolutely out of this world. It's a super unique place. It's tough to put into words until you experience it. I mean, you have the fishing, which is absolutely phenomenal, but then on top of that, you have the travel to get to these destinations that is just as phenomenal. The topography, the landscape when you're flying around these huge jagged mountain peaks, you're flying over top of glaciers, you see wildlife up in the mountains, and you get to chase, I think I've hooked and landed over 7 different species of fish on my trips up there. I mean, it really is just mind boggling. I mean, you have this this landscape that just it's almost like when I came home, I'm like, how am I going to describe this to people? It's almost like it's interesting. You're kind of right in the middle of the continental divide at some points, separating two mountain ranges, and it's like Jurassic Park. It's like, you have this vast area with huge mountains. You'd think King Kong's gonna, just walk out, or a huge dinosaur. It's like going back into time to an area that is just untouched and pristine. And when you're flying, and you have these thoughts to yourself about what it's like down there, what's down there. Like, there's a moose in the water right there. Have a look at that. Or, hey, there's a herd of caribou right there. Or look at there's sheep over there, or there's a bear. I mean, it's a wild place, and the fishing is just incredible. We had a day just talking about numbers. I mean, aside from the grayling, I mean, I know with the grayling, one day we caught over 100 on the dry fly. I mean, it was absolutely insane. But we went to a spot that we also fished rainbow trout on the dry fly, and we fished a half a day. And I mean, I know it almost sounds like it's fabricated, but this is the honest truth. We hooked over 100 rainbow trout on the dry fly. I mean, you can't even believe this stuff that's happening there, but it's crazy. This is the total package when you're looking for an adventure trip, looking to take in, like you said, take in your surroundings, being a wild place, beautiful area of the world, and also you're catching tons of fish. I mean, when you combine that all together, I don't know how you beat it. I really don't. I mean, it's at the top of the list.
Wow, that's amazing. So, or take us back on that. So, did you fly him in and fish with Brandon on that trip when they did that lake with the grayling?
That's right, yes. The way our trips work, the guests in our lakes or chalets, they all have their own separate chalets at the lodge property. And that's basically like a modern hotel room, but you have your own private cabin right by the airplane. So we have breakfast in the morning, then we board the airplane. And in Brandon's case, I flew him up to Frog River to our outpost cabin. We spent the day out there. I usually have shore lunch, or if you are fishing the streams that we cannot really get back to the airplane to prepare the fish, we take a sandwich along. We spend all day fishing out there, and then we return back to the lodge in the evening, discuss the program for the next day, and the next day with Brandon, we went up rainbow trout fishing. We experienced a beautiful day, followed the spine of the Northern Rockies. The peaks are over 10,000 feet high in some of the areas, to that remote mountain lake where we dropped in, and we caught some gorgeous wild native rainbow trout.
Oh, right. Rainbow. So yeah, you also have rainbow trout. So that's the one of the trout species that you have. Is that the main one up there?
I mean, rainbow is widespread up there. And again, they're all native. They are not stocked. We have them in the rivers. We have them in the mountain lakes up there. There is dozens of places where we can take the rainbow trout fishermen. So the main species are rainbows, the Arctic grayling, and the bull trout for the fly fishermen.
Yeah, and those rainbows, they get big. They can get up to 12 pounds. And the bull trout are even bigger. So it's not like we'll talk gear pretty quick here, but Dad's always kind of chiding me when I show up with a 10-pound test, because if you're fishing for rainbows up there, you don't know if you're going to get into something big, and 10-pound test just doesn't cut the mustard for the fish in these waters.
10 pound. What do you got to go to? Like 20, 15, 20?
I go with 15 if depending on where I am. If I'm going for where I know there's going to be big lake trout and pike, I'm going to step it up again.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I'm always thinking time, like it is a short season, June, July, August. So let's just say it's July. We're kind of doing the Brendan, Morrison thing. And by the way, that was episode 432 when Brendan was on. If somebody wanted to listen to that, we'll have a link in the show notes. But so if it was July, we're coming in there with maybe a crew. We got a few people coming in. What would be the species we'd be thinking about there? Is that like everything, a few of one, or what would that look like?
That's exactly the beauty of it. With such a short, condensed season, you can hit multiple species in their prime. They're all pretty much feeding around the same time. So Brandon just cherry picked it. Of course, he went for one of the prime fly fishing times. Being July and August, and he went right. Smack dab there end of July, and
yep. And it's nice out there, right? This is not a cold, even though you're in the Rockies. It's pretty nice.
The reason I feel like our hatch is really good is this is probably it's just past the heat dome of the hottest part of the summer. So it's the fish are more active. The water isn't as hot as it could be, but the hatches are going to be really good. So really what, to get back to your question, what you're hitting that time of the year, let's call it midsummer in the Rockies, it's going to be rainbow trout, it's going to be bull trout, it's going to be the graylings. And what's really fun on a fly rod, I find, is the pike. So you get those 4 on a fly rod easily. They're all in their prime around then. Excellent, like, fishing. It's crazy. The other 2 species we target, they're earlier in the season. I find to get a walleye or a lake trout on a fly rod, I mean that's gonna be a June thing. It's just they're gonna be too deep otherwise. You can also go really, really late in the season, but that's for people who want to spend the night like myself out on freezing lakes and
Right.
and tying knots on monofilament that doesn't really want to be twisted anymore.
Gotcha. Okay. And so for me, I'm thinking, I've caught tons of rainbow. I love rainbows. Everybody loves rainbows, but I mean, bull trout, grayling, and pike are definitely 3 species for me that I would love to tie into. Maybe, I don't know, or what's your species of choice? Do you have one over the years, or do you kind of like everything?
I get the question asked often, and I tell you, I don't really have a favorite species. I just like them all. I like the variety we have up there, and to eat any of those fish.
Are they good? Are the pike good eating?
I don't order fish anywhere else except the ones I catch up north.
He's very particular about his fish, and even when it comes to fishing too, he just fishes up there because just the abundance that we have, and it just. Yeah, but the beauty of it is there as well. Like, we can have a shore lunch because there's such healthy populations. The regulations up there allow for like 2 to 4 fish depending on the season per person. Like, it's something that people look at and they say, "Oh, you can eat a grayling,"
right?
And it's
yeah,
you can.
It's like a trout, right?
There's plenty of them, and they're fantastic fish.
Yeah. What about pike and bull trout? Can you eat those? Would you eat those?
Yes, the pike is an excellent fish to eat.
No kidding.
Yes, and to tell you the truth, it's one of my favorite fishes. The big issue with the pike is, you have to know how to fillet them. Otherwise, you have those little Y bones in it, and I just hate eating fish when I have to pick the bones out of my mouth. But if you know how to fillet a pike, I tell you, it's going to become your favorite meat to eat.
Oh, this is great.
I think awesome. The thing about a pike, Dave, that really it's the filleting of it that gave it such a bad reputation. Plus, I've also kind of read that if you catch them in warmer waters, swampy waters, they can taste swampy. But that's not the case when you're dealing with with the frigid glacial style waters of the Northern Rockies. So these fish I say they're like halibut. Like, they have that firm flesh of like a halibut. They're muscular. They're strong. And oh man, just to catch them alone is awesome, but to get to eat your catch, that's pretty darn cool.
Wow. Okay, so this is good. So pike is a valid. I mean, we talk a lot about, you always down here, musky pike sort of thing, but pike seems to be that species that actually bites quite a bit. Do you find that they're fairly easy to catch once you find them?
I got a couple stories for you, but yeah, the pike they are aggressive. When they're on the bite, you don't need to move your boat. I was out this season fishing with some guys who are, casting their streamers out. They didn't have to cast more than 20 feet. They're just sitting in a, shallow weed bed. I think the water was maybe 6 feet deep at max. They're casting their streamers out, retrieving them. They were fishing for 4 or 5 hours in the same spot, catching all sorts of pike, ranging from, smaller 5-pounders up to 20-pound pike, and we can catch them up to 40 pounds. This wasn't the spot where we go for the monsters, but it was a nice little weed bed. And what was really funny about it is, there as a fly fisherman, you think, oh, going after a pike, well, there's rainbows and grayling, but that pike is such an aggressive fish. You strip a fly, even a mouse on the surface, they hit that thing. They do acrobatics. Like, that's a big fish. It hammers hard. It just races to fly. I don't know. They're a total thrill. And while I was out with that shoot, like with those guys, I saw a huge mayfly hatch, and it's like, oh man, I should switch over to maybe a spent spinner or something, right? But those mayflies were probably the safest flies I've ever seen. I saw one grayling go for it. He was a pretty good size. I think he was maybe a good like 16, 18-inch grayling. Like we get them fairly commonly in that size. So this all is on his own. I was like, I wonder why. And then I saw the pike around, and he was gone. Like those mayflies were left unhindered on their hatch.
Oh, gotcha.
While everyone was out on the pike.
So those pike, the grayling is that's their meal. That's a meal for the pike.
That's the thing I find, like the pike. I mean, they will eat on everything. They hunt the Rocky Mountain whitefish that are in our area too. We don't really trophy fish them as much, but they'll feed on the grayling. They'll feed on the lake trout. They'll feed on themselves. Like it's not uncommon when you catch a pike. That's why you go for a very strong braided or steel leader with them to get two fish on at once. Like we've had pike follow another pike right into the net.
Jeez,
they're vicious.
Yeah. How are you guys fishing? Like typically, we got a few species, pike, grayling. I know grayling, we talk dry flies. That's one amazing way to do it. But like with pike or bull trout, how are you fishing out of the boat, or is this something where most people are off the bank?
So the pike, I would say, are going to be very, very heavily on a boat. The main two tackle there is going to be a streamer, 8-weight rod, usually a floating line with that steel leader I might have mentioned. That's kind of the typical pike setup. The bull trout, you can catch them off the bank or off of a gravel bar, but sometimes you do. That's the beauty of what we have. Like we have about 40 different boats in the backcountry. So
nice.
When we're out guiding, we'll also have one of the guides out, looking for the fish as well too. And the bull trout, you'll sometimes catch them out on the water as well, because they do patrol quite a bit.
They do. Okay. So bull trout. And so this isn't like bull trout. You're in the streams, and there are some streams you guys are fishing there. Or is it mostly lakes?
No, we're easily 50-50. I mean, when we're talking streams, we have about 40 prolific streams and rivers that we hit. We pretty much everywhere we land with the floatplane is a lake. So those lakes are very abundant as well too. But for the fly fishing, we're fishing mostly rivers and streams. So yeah, the bull trout, they do like the larger waters, so that's why you can get a boat into it.
Okay. Wow. So basically, yeah, I mean, you've got these 3 months packed with just pretty much whatever you want to do, whether you want to be on the surface, going streamers, out of the boat, or off the bank. Those the remote cabins, those outpost cabins, is that something that a lot of people take advantage of, or is that kind of more of a unique thing that people are staying out there?
They're a little bit more unique. We do offer them guided, but most people do them as a self-guided trip. They're like a more, basic experience, while our all-inclusive is you get all the modern amenities right at the resort, while the outposts, they're very well outfitted. But, it's a wood stove, and we have a little generator there, so you have, light and power to recharge cameras. And but the fishing at them is just spectacular. They're fun too.
Yeah, that's cool. So, Urs, I have a question for you. This is, you probably haven't seen this movie, but I just watched it. It was probably maybe one of the worst movies ever. But have you heard of the Cocaine Bear? You guys heard of that one? This movie that just came out?
Yeah, I don't think he saw that.
You probably have. Don't watch it if you have a choice. But I say that because I know a question you probably commonly get is bears, right? People are worried about bears. And I know that, you will not probably have an encounter or no issues. But this Cocaine Bear movie was crazy. Literally, somebody was flying over remote sort of Canada or whatever it was, and they threw a bunch of cocaine out. It was a drug dealer, threw it out the window, and a bear got a hold of the cocaine and basically started eating it and then killing everybody, if you can imagine that. So that's a random story. But tell me this, like the bears, wildlife, all that, is there any worries there? And then also, what are the wildlife we're going to be seeing out there?
In our area, the big wildlife populations are the stone sheep. We have a moose, we have a elk, a caribou, and then of course we have grizzlies and black bears. Now, the big difference between us and fishing on the coast, on the salmon streams, the bears are not on the rivers. They do not relate that those rivers have fish in it, which we fish up here. While on the coast, you see the bears fishing and basically competing with the fishermen for a spot to catch salmon.
Yeah.
When the salmon runs are in. The fish in our area, they're in there all the time in those streams. They may migrate between the stream and the lake, but they're native to the area. They don't go anywhere. And that's the other big advantage. We always have to fish. The timing is not as critical as if you go salmon fishing on the coast. But that also keeps the bears away because they do not come and fish our streams.
And there isn't that, that decay like the salmon, right? The salmon, a big salmon run a couple weeks later is a huge attraction for the bears. They chime in on that. So yeah, we have bears in our area, but we've never had a problem with them. I think mainly for that reason. They're not really into the fish, and we go respectfully with them. And
yeah, so you'll see them out there. Will you see bears and caribou while you're out there in the summer?
Oh, you will see bears, caribous, stone sheep, like that said. While we're flying out over the mountains, you'll probably see mountain goats up at the top.
Oh,
you'll probably see the grizzlies right on the top of the mountains as they're chasing these goats.
No kidding. They're climbing up the mountains.
They're up there, which is another nice thing. They're not down in the valleys when we're flying.
Oh, they're not. So they don't hang down at the valleys too much.
Most of the wildlife you see is when we fly to those remote streams and lakes.
Oh,
the wildlife you may see on a lake is moose. There's usually a cow moose and a calf in the summer months there on the shores feeding on the weeds. But other wildlife, no, you usually don't see it from the lake while you're fishing. Again, you see them mostly in the air as we travel to the
up in the mountains.
Up in the mountains, wow. Cool. So there's definitely going to be some wildlife. That's always a big. I always think of these trips as like the fishing is definitely part of it, but it's just everything, right? The experience and this. What sounds amazing about this is that you're going into a really truly remote area in the Northern Rockies, like we said. And you're probably, when you're fishing, are you likely not going to see anybody else out there fishing?
You won't see anybody. That's the beauty of it, and that's kind of what the whole admission is about. It's getting to a spot that only you have access to with a float plane, with your little group of favorite fishermen. Like it's amazing. We take a maximum of 9 guests a week, 70 different fishing destinations. It spreads out that probably most of these spots see maybe 30 anglers a season, because we also rotate them a lot too with the season.
Gotcha. Okay. So this is something where if somebody's interested, they probably want to get a head start, because it might take a while to get a booking, especially for the prime time.
Exactly. Like if someone wants to fish, the prime times, or even just fish with us on these trips, this takes a bit of planning. It's best to get in contact earlier and just, see kind of, what you're looking for to do, and, shoot me a line. I'm always happy to chat fishing, but that's why that drive-in thing is always difficult, because it's so hard when people want to fish and they just show up and we just.
Generally, our trip needs to be planned, and you need to come up for a week to really experience it and have to take the opportunity and fish for all those species. If you just come for a day or two, to be honest, it's probably not really worth it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, just like anything, you could catch it on a day where maybe it's not perfect conditions, and having a week.
We do have that occasionally that people drop by, want to just do a days of fishing. We may be able to help and do it for them, but you know what? Most of those people come back the next year and book the week-long package.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Yeah. Not the taste of it,
Yeah.
That's right. Okay.
I think the beauty of fishing is, when you don't feel rushed, I think it always works best.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Well, I think we painted the picture pretty good. I wanted to talk species and talk if somebody's thinking about heading up there, what they can expect. Anything else we're missing here we want to shed some light on, as far as I know there's a lot we could dig into any of these species and go deep, but
we talked a bit about the species, but I think we could call them the big four. They're the grayling, the pike, the rainbow trout, the bull trout, but the other two, the walleye is a little bit of a gear fisherman's dream, but that's a fun fish on a fly rod too. The underappreciated one, it's such a tricky one. It's a lake trout. People always forget about the lake trout.
And that's one I want to catch. I mean, lake trout to me is actually very high on the list. Like, I would love to catch a lake trout, right? Because it's kind of
it's a cool fish. Like, it's the lake trout in the end, it has two body morphs. It has a slender body morph. I think it's around their sexual maturity, around 2 or 3 years of age. They either will stay slender and they max out, I think, around 12-ish pounds, or they turn into the big, honkers we know is like the fats, and they go up to 40 plus pounds up in these waters here, and they're totally different fish. Fly fishing, I love to go, of course I like kind of the more nimble, that slender type there, because they're just like catching, a rainbow. They're a lot of fun. They have quite a bit of power. I can't tell the difference between catching a bull trout or one of those lake trouts like that.
That's I was gonna say they're pretty much very similar, right?
They're very similar. The difference being that they're also in the char family too. I like catching those lake trout. I think sometimes people kind of miss out on them. The only problem with them with the fly fishing is if you're not wanting to get exclusively them, they kind of sit in a season, they sit more in June, which is a little bit early for some of the other species. There's, you can catch what we call the Grand Slam, or the fishing Grand Slam of the Rockies up there, but it really boils down to, that time to catch everything. And the lake trout is usually the one that kind of,
that's the one
that breaks dashes the dream, because it's a little bit deeper than you'd like.
Gotcha. And what is the Grand Slam of the Northern Rockies up there?
Yeah, so I mean that's catching all 6 species there on a trip.
Wow, 6 species. That's crazy, right? You'd have to go in late June?
You can catch 6 species in a trip, and if a lucky day you can easily catch a IGFA Grand Slam of 3 species of trout. The go-to time for that is usually June, early July, because the lake trout makes it a little bit more challenging every other season. But it is, it's not uncommon for our guests to catch a Grand Slam up there.
And the Grand Slam is it rainbow, grayling, bull trout, pike, walleye, lake trout?
Yeah, so the Grand Slam is the 6 trophy species we have up there. That's going to be the classic, the rainbow trout, the Arctic grayling, the bull trout, and then maybe more exotic being the lake trout, the northern pike, the walleye. That is the Grand Slam of the BC Rockies here.
Okay, and are walleye or pike harder to catch up there?
I would say the walleye is harder for fly fishing. It seems like you need to go a little bit deeper. The pike are really good for the fly fishing. They're excellent for the sight fishing because they do like to come into the shallows, while I just don't see the walleyes like that. That said, the interesting thing about the walleyes is they do school up a lot more than the pike. So once you are on them, you're going to be getting a couple. You catch one, you catch more.
Right. And so if we were coming up there, we would be flying out in a float plane, and we would have either Daniel, you, yours, or somebody else, or your brother that would be kind of guiding. Is that how that would work? Or
One of 3 of us or all of us.
Yeah. Gotcha. So you go get us in the spot where the fish are, and then we'd hop out there with the gear. What would be the gear? You mentioned the 8-weight. Is it kind of like bring a 6-weight and an 8-weight and some sinking lines?
Exactly. That's gear-wise what you want to do. But on the note there, myself, Mike, or my father, like we're with you for the whole day. So it's not a get out and spend a day. We're there with you for the whole day, which is pretty nice. So you don't have to be writing things on napkins to remember. It's a fully guided trip, and we have some assistant guides with us as well.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And yeah, gear-wise, I think that's a good one. Yeah, 6 and 8-weight. We talked earlier a little bit about we've talked about, rainbow trout and sometimes getting into a bull trout. Having a 6-weight allows you kind of the leverage to work with those bigger fish when they hit. Don't, tie on too light of a leader. The fish up here, there's so little pressure. There's no need to have these fine little leaders on it. Go for a 15 pound test. Don't waste your time with something that's going to snap when the big boy gets on, because it's going to happen during a day of fishing like this. So yeah, 6-weight is what we swing most of the time when we're, in the rivers and streams. If we're going for pike, big lake trout, now we're going to go to the 8-weight. Those fish will go up to 40 pounds. If you're fighting one of those, you don't want to do it on a 6-weight.
No.
Yeah.
Or even an 8-weight, right? If you get a 40-pounder, I mean, what's the largest fish you guys have seen out there? I don't know. Is pike the one that gets the largest, or what would be the big giant?
It's lake trout and pike.
Okay.
But regularly we catch pike in the 30 to 40 pound range. While lake trouts and that size, they usually go deep. And that's a little bit tougher for the fly fisherman to get down to.
Okay. Yeah, but you can get them with gear.
Oh, yeah, you can get them with gear, yeah.
Yeah.
So you can, the odds fly fishing to get into like a 30-plus pound fish is actually pretty high depending on the spot we go into. So we can really narrow it in. If someone says, I just want to catch a bunch of pike, I just want to feel what the pike are like on a fly rod, we got a spot for that. If people want to go for big pike, there's spots for that too. We have the same with rainbows. We have spots where there's prolific rainbows, and then there's spots where we're going to go for, big trophy rainbows. There's spots for all the species. That 70 different spots to target, it really kind of gets there. So it really makes it easy with the gear selection. You kind of know what you want to fish for the day. We sit down with the guides. We talk about what we want to bring out. But that 8-weight, I find, is kind of the best compromise of castability, and it allows you to, fight a bigger fish. Like you're in for a fight regardless with a 30-plus pound fish on an 8-weight.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, there's no reason you need a 10-weight because that's just going to tire your arm casting that.
It's a 10-weight. The 10-weight is just hard to cast, and that's why I think that 6-weight is the perfect balance. That's the go-to rod every single time, except for the pike or the big lake trout, because that's there. You're just undergunning yourself a little bit too much, and even the 8-weight's probably a bit undergunned when you get in a big one, but you'll still survive probably.
Yeah. Okay. And then you guys, and we talk actually, occasionally about conventional fishing, just because a lot of times some of the best fly anglers we've had on here that have like top of the game in fly fishing, they've talked about the influence of conventional fishing has helped them get better at fly, right? Like the types of bugs and just understanding that. How do you guys, conventional wise, like what would be, are you doing, you're doing quite a bit of that as well? To maybe talk about that. How would you guys be targeting, or which species would be better with conventional gear?
With conventional gear, you probably would enjoy the walleye fishing. You probably would enjoy the fishing early in the season, just after the ice goes out. The lake trouts go on a feeding frenzy. You find the lake trouts basically on the surface. It's a great time to fly fish for them. But the spin cast, I personally like to do that in June. Although it's good all throughout the season, but June is the lake trout month, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that the gear fishing or conventional fishing species, I'd say that the one that is super fun up there is the lake trout. I think that's an awesome fish. It's the size of a king salmon, pretty much, going into the 40-pound range there. And you can just get down to them with the gear that the fly is just, it's hard to.
You just can't, yeah.
You can play around with sinking lines and, all these things, and you can get on them, but I just don't think anyone can get consistently as a gear fisherman, pulling a spoon or
yeah. The spoon, yeah. I talked to Phil Roy, our Littoral Zone, host. Those that know Phil, he's definitely the Stillwater guy. But he's mentioned that before. That's the challenge, is just getting so deep. You can do it, but yeah, it's a lot of work. So that's what it is with the conventional gear. It's like a spoon, or what would be the one lure you would be using for lake trout?
My favorite lure and spoon is the 5 of diamond.
5 of diamond, okay.
Yeah, it's or the red and white daredevil. Map spinners work quite well as too. We use single barbless hooks in those streams and lakes, and the size of the spoon, anywhere from a quarter to 1 ounce.
And, I have to say, if you're out fly fishing, sometimes it's nice to have a conventional angler with you. It sometimes animates the fish. I've seen it a couple times, and I think it's good even for our guides. We always like to bring along, even a cheap little spin rod just to animate the fish with like the sparkle of a MEP spinner going through the water can all of a sudden get the bite on again.
Oh, there you go.
It's a cool little thing. It just works. And you can toss egg sucking leeches all you want, and if the bite's not there, but it seems like when you drag a little MEP spinner through, all of a sudden they might be right back on it again.
That's right. And the 5 of diamonds, I think I know that one. So it's red and white. It's basically a spoon that's red and white, and it's kind of got diamond shaped on it.
The red and white is the daredevil, The 5 of diamond is basically a yellow base body with 5 dark red dots on it. And I always like some dark red in my lures, or even to a certain degree in the flies, because we have lots of freshwater shrimp, and they are red.
Oh.
And many of the fish feed on them, and you actually see it in their meat. The meat of those lake trouts, it's totally red. It's like a salmon.
Oh, no kidding.
It goes back to what they are feeding on.
Yeah,
right.
It's totally fascinating, and I think I mean it's a great time to even talk the flies too, because you like what we're. I can tell you the gold standard, probably the fly that I've caught the most on, and I'm sure everyone said it before, is the woolly bugger.
Exactly, the woolly bugger.
The woolly bugger will always get you a fish. Rain or shine, it's going to get you a fish. But no, we do really well with caddis flies too, like elk hair, deer hair caddis, parachute Adams, copper johns. Those are all super successful flies for us up here. It's also, don't underestimate like something simple like a tan tom thumb.
Oh yeah,
a beetle
classic
pattern. Yeah, Royal Coachman's. Dad's seen Royal Coachman's catch fish for over 30 years up here. Like,
there you go.
Those classic, dry fly patterns. The nymphs, the beadheads. Those catch fish up here. You don't like. They're not picky.
They're very selective.
Yeah.
They're not selective. That's what's great about, I think, this trip is that it's, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. This is lots of the old traditional stuff works. I think of the brook trout. We're doing a brook trout trip down, kind of on the East Coast next year. And I keep asking about brook trout. And everybody's saying, hey, they're easy to catch. You could just go, you're up in the mountain streams, these tiny fish. It's awesome. But I also think like Chad Johnson was on the podcast. He's a big streamer guy down on like the White River 4. And he's a big fly designer. He's got this fly called the Big Johnson, and he talked about how he wants the fly to, he strips it, and then he stops it. And he designs it so that the fly turns broadside to the fish, because the predator fish wants to T-bone it and wants to break it in half. You know what I mean? So there are some technical things if you get into places where you want that fly to do things, but I don't think it sounds like you have to get to that level.
You don't need to get too elaborate. That said, when talking flies, you may as well say a word or two for streamers. That's what the bull trout, that's what the pike will go for. These are more predatory fish, by extension, also the lake trout. Something that looks like a bait fish, and the go-to bait fish up here are often going to be something like a whitefish or a sculpin, but also the grayling and the rainbows are actually, they find themselves on the menu for these bigger fish as well too. So you imitate those with streamers, and you can have some excellent success. And those predators, when they hit these streamers, that they're hitting them like dinner's getting away. So
right, yeah, that was what Chad said. He said basically, and again, this is a different area, but he said they come in, they T-bone it to like kill it, and then they turn around and eat it head first, right? So that the gills don't get caught up. But this is great. Well, tell me, I had a couple other notes before we start to think about taking out of here. But are there hot springs? Is there a hot springs up? That's something I'm always interested in here in your area.
There is a lot of geothermal activity up there. We have one of our outpost cabins has a hot springs right at it. But
oh, wow.
Even more conveniently, right from the lodge, there's actually a renowned hot springs on the Alaska Highway called the Liard Hot Springs. It's like about less than 30 minutes from our lodge.
Oh, no, nice. It's Liard?
Liard River Hot Springs.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Probably one of the hidden gems of the Alaska Highway. If you've traveled the highway, you've probably heard about them. They're right at our doorstep pretty much. Perfect, to rest, that casting elbow after.
Sure. Wow. So you have a outpost cabin where you can literally hang at a cabin.
We have an outpost with springs as well. And yeah, there's a lot of springs all kind of in the area up here. It's pretty cool. We're sitting on the Continental Divide. It makes up a large part of our fishery. So I think because of that, there's also these fissures that lead to these hot springs.
And are you guys going to the other side of the divide, or is this mostly on the west side of the?
We do. We fish actually two different watersheds. It's 45,000 square miles of fishing territory, and two watersheds being both the Pacific and of course, the Atlantic there, or Arctic.
Yeah, we fish the upper reaches of the Schildknecht River area, and which of course is the Pacific drainage. And then, for example, Frog River is right at the Continental Divide. you basically can walk from the cabin from the Arctic drainage over to the Pacific drainage. Just being on a spot like this in the middle of nowhere, it just gives you goosebumps,
Amazing.
It's pretty cool because you see it in the fish as well. That's why we have Arctic grayling, we have rainbows. Those two are sometimes directly linked. Like, you don't have any Arctic grayling in the Pacific watershed. And at a place like Frog River, I'll be catching a whole bunch of grayling, and I need only, walk, maybe 30 minutes, a little bit through a bush path, and all of a sudden there's no more grayling. And there's
wow.
like a light switch. There's like hundreds of grayling, and then there's none. Like, if there's a fish that's totally prolific in our area, apart from the rainbows, schools and schools of grayling.
God, yeah. Wow, lots of grayling. And what's the Nanda Peak? Is that one of the big mountains or one of the big peaks out there?
It's a beautiful peak that looks kind of onto the Muncho Lake Valley. I really love it up there. I spent a lot of time. We do like hiking trips up in that area too.
Oh yeah.
But actually, probably the most impressive mountain looking over kind of where I grew up in Muncho Lake there is actually Mount Peterson. It's named after one of the first kind of trappers in the area. Apart from the First Nations, he lived there, and he got a peak named after him when they built the Alaska Highway.
Oh, nice. There you go. Good. Another history story we'll have to follow up on. Do you guys do throughout the year now? You have the fishing, the fly fishing, conventional. Do you do other things? Like, are you hitting hunting, or what's that look like the rest of your year?
This time of the year, we've just flown our float planes down for the winter. We get all the major servicing done. We do some training. We prepare for the next season. But we're also, we're coming right into the holidays here. We've got in a couple weeks' time, I've got New Year's Eve happening. We have an all-inclusive trip out of the city, and now instead of chasing rainbows, we're chasing northern lights.
Oh, nice!
It's pretty cool. We get the northern lights in British Columbia.
Wow.
Those hot springs. It's a really fun winter package. So we do quite a lot over the winter. Less fishing, but it's there's always something going on.
Yeah. So you see the northern lights out there. Is that pretty common throughout the year, or just during the winter?
They're very common from probably mid-August on. It just needs to get dark enough to see them. And New Year's Eve, it's pitch dark. It's perfect for that. So it's pretty cool. Also, a fun one we do in the winter is Dad builds a big runway on the lake, on the ice, and we have our ice strip fly-in. So we make a 5,000-foot runway, invite all sorts of, just it's open. People can just contact us, and then they can come and land and spend a couple days at the lodge and swap fishing stories and flying stories and just have a good time.
So do you put like wheels when you land on the ice?
Yeah, one of our float planes we use for the fishing trips is actually on amphibs. So that means it has landing gear on it as well as its floats. So we usually use that one more in the winter. It's pretty fun.
Okay. Wow. So people can. So you're talking the lake, the Muncho Lake,
right in front of the lodge. Yeah.
So right there, so people can land in the winter. And this is like what, through December, January, February sort of thing.
Yeah, it's usually always nowadays more starting kind of mid-January. We've just noticed that the ice just isn't thick enough nowadays in December.
Oh, right. Yeah, you guys have probably seen some change. Yeah, being in the Northern Rockies, I'm sure you've seen like climate change, some changes in the glaciers and stuff like that up there.
Yeah, it's definitely the winters are getting milder. However, they almost seem to last a little bit longer. And there is probably a little bit of a shift happening in the seasons, but it hasn't really affected the fishing up here.
I find it almost has made it, like Dad said, the seasons are a little bit longer. It feels like our fall is milder. So, now we're fishing in mid-September, where in the past, that some of the spots were starting to freeze even. So, it's not a great thing, but the fish, I think, are enjoying the extra month or so of feed.
Also, the insect activities holds up longer.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was seeing caddis up until October 15th or something up there, and like a caddis hatch that time of the year blew my mind, but it's still happening. And I remember when I was pretty young growing up there that there was already snow on the ground.
Right. Yeah. So you're seeing just like everybody else, things are changing up there, and kind of a joke, but Glacier National Park down south of you in the U.S., they are talking about changing the name because the glaciers are going away, right? But
it's kind of sad, but there definitely is some implications. But
yeah. But probably more the reason to get up there now before things change even more. I mean, it seems like obviously there's fluctuations in climate, and I had a question for you guys. I was just curious because I love the conservation stuff going on around the country, around the world. Do you guys are there any groups up there? I was going to give a shout out to Federation or Fly Fishers International, who does some good work. But do you guys, is that something that you see out there at all? Or are there any Canadian-based conservation groups that are doing work?
We see the conservation more or less from conserving the Northern Rockies. We have a good friend, Wayne Solchak. He was very instrumental to create the protected area. And the Northern Rockies actually are British Columbia's biggest protected area.
Oh, wow.
And provincial park.
The
Muskwa-Kechika, and that only came over the last 20 years. Prior to that, there was mining activity. There was the potential of logging activities. And some people seen the writing on the wall and decided to protect it and keep the roads out. And it's a very unique area. And there's lots of protection going on that level, to maintain the wildlife, maintain the biodiversity, and maintain the hunting opportunities, and especially also the fishing in our case.
Yeah, and we work quite a bit with Fishing BC as well too. They have a lot of stewardship programs that they link into to protect these wild fisheries. We work a lot with actually fisheries in Canada as well. They're always, when they're up in the area, they love to talk to us, since they don't actually even have many opportunities to see these backcountry and only access areas as well. So it's always we see this as a long-term thing. We see it as stewardship. We live from this land, and we love these fish to have healthy populations.
Wow, that's so cool. So Daniel, on gear, we're coming up here, we're getting ready for this trip. A lot of people, sometimes maybe don't have all the gear, but for somebody that wants to have all the gear, what do you tell them? What do we need to do so we don't forget anything here?
Well, I mean, the fun answer is I can go into the list of things that you need, but we also can supply all the tackle for a trip like this. We stock all our anglers with either a 6 or an 8 weight. It really depends on the species you're going for. Those big pike and lake trout, those are going to really need the heavier rod and the 8 weight. While, you do pretty good with a 6 weight on everything else. 6 weight seems like it's a little bit heavy for maybe going after some rainbow trout. But when you talk about 15-pound plus bull trout mixed in with those rainbows, you'll sure be happy you have, the backbone of a 6 weight. So those are kind of go-to rods. A 6 and an 8 is what we stock. It's also what I always recommend. Yes, when you have a 40-pound pike, an 8 weight is going to be undergunned. But the thing is, it's nicer to have that casting, so you at least can cast it out. If you go with a 10 weight rod, it's going to be super stiff. To get into that, really just for that one big pike, I think you're better off with the 8 weight, and you can play it a bit. The pike especially, they tire fairly quick, so you don't want to play them too long. The mortality goes up. But the 8 weight, I will do the job even if you need to on a big fish.
Okay. All right. And what if somebody's thinking about they're either a big fly tire or they want to get a bunch of flies? They love the flies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
the flies, there again, the easy solution, we can deal with it for you. But, that's not the fun. If you love making your own flies and prepping for a trip like this, we have a lot of guests that do that. They get me to send pictures of insects that are up there in hatches, and they'll start matching it. The go-to is probably a caddis. A caddis pattern, an elk hair, deer hair, those are going to do really well. Kind of in size 12 generally is a good spot to go. Those are just good general purpose flies. Another one I would say that's really easy is like that Tom Thumb, easy to tie. It's kind of cool if you're just getting into fly tying and you've got this trip booked on in, you might want to try your variant of this classic pattern, and the Tom Thumb's an easy one to do, and you will catch fish on it, which is pretty cool. Yeah, the mayflies, a little bit trickier to tie, of course. You got like the parachutes. Like I find those parachute Adams, they're just awesome fly, simple, and they seem to always just work. You can get into, PMDs and really specialize, but the thing to remember is these are wild and native fish, and they're very opportunistic. They have a very short feeding period, with the ice out being in some spots just in the start of June. And, ice can come in already in the end of September. So they're not, to match colors and everything, like, you don't always need to. You're almost better with a general purpose pattern and then going there. And the same goes for, the subsurface stuff, to go with like beadhead nymphs, a prince nymph, or, copper johns, like that stuff. If it gets you down there a bit faster, that's probably better than getting to colors.
Gotcha. What about the humpy? You guys ever used the humpy, the dry fly?
Oh yeah. I love the humpy. Yeah. The humpy does really good.
This is cool. Yeah. I'm thinking of a cool place where you just go and be like, you know what? I'm going to bring up all the old school, cool, traditional dry flies, like the stimulator,
like
Royal Coachman.
Royal Coachman stimulators. Yeah, this Royal Coachman I find is one of those flies you barely find at the shops nowadays. It's kind of so retro, right? But man, we have a lot of guests that swing a Royal Coachman, and they do really good.
Yeah, that's good. I'm just looking at the Tom Thumb. I love it because it's such a classic. We have a pattern that we use on the Deschutes River, and it's the tied down caddis. Essentially, it looks a lot like the Tom Thumb, just without that clump. But there's some cool history on the Tom Thumb. It looks like it was created in the 1940s by Jack Horner. So good history stuff. Awesome. So what else on gear? We got flies. What about line? Does this just kind of bring up a dry line or what?
Yeah, I find a good floating line, that matches your rod, of course. You don't need to have I sometimes like to go with like Rio's precision lines, like a Rio trout precision line, because we don't need massive casts. We're fishing mountain streams and rivers. They're all freestone. You really don't need to, get a 30-foot cast out there most of the time. A 15-foot cast is already enough. If you do anything more than 20, you're probably bouncing the bank or something. So a good line that shoots well accurately is more important than, some sort of, big spay line or something. It can be done, but I don't think it's really going to be more effective. I also like a sinking line. Depends on the species you're going for, but some trout fishermen, they like to mix it up and go for a lake trout from time to time, or even sometimes a bull trout. Those species, the lake trout especially, like to be deeper. So to have a nice sinking line, that just gives you another tool in your arsenal. And it can happen too that these are all wild and native fish. You have a weather system come in, the pressure increases, the fish are going to be a bit deeper, and if you have a sinking line, well, it just makes life a lot easier. You get down to right to the fish. I've had a couple days where it happens, right? You're fishing, the floating line and the nymph just isn't getting deep enough. You swap it out and bam, you're on fish again.
Yeah, perfect. And we'll put links out to the Littoral Zone podcast. Part of our Phil Roy in our network is doing this, and
he's excellent. Yeah.
Yeah. And he really broke down. We don't have enough time here to break down everything, but he went into like 2 episodes just on fly lines. So I'll put those in the show notes so people can dig in deeper. But anything else we want to talk about gear here before we get out of here on the next topic?
I think the one gear that I think a lot is easy to miss is waders. Waders and boots. And actually, I always like a wading staff too. These are wild rivers still. It's not hard wading. They're pretty soft bottom, like loose gravel. Some of them have like clay. It's really, really nice wading, but you do need some waders for a fly fishing trip up here, unless you're looking to just do the still water. But with so many beautiful rivers and streams, man, you'd be missing out. So a good set of waders is I find a must.
Yeah, a good set of waders. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And then everything else is pretty much show up and you guys have it all covered, right?
Yeah, we can cover all the tackle.
So this has been, you guys have painted a really cool picture about what this is, why it's unique. I'm curious, or as you've been up there for a long time. Have you, I think of us, we're thinking about maybe move and find a different place. Have you ever thought about moving out of there or, retiring or what's that? Are you going to be there till the very end?
Well, I dread the word retiring. I love to fly. It has been my passion all my life. And I keep flying as long as they let me keep my license.
There you go. And to keep your license, is that pretty much you just fly a certain number of hours per year to keep it? Is that how that works?
Well, as a commercial pilot, the big thing, of course, you have to pass your medical. In our age, we have to do it every 6 months. And as long as I can pass my medical, I will be flying.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So a certain point, once at whatever age that is, there will be a time where, Daniel will have to take the lead or sort of thing. But until then, you're gonna be flying. So if we come up there, you'll probably be in one of those planes.
Oh yeah, he'll be right there with it, and I suspect after that he'll become a bit of a passenger princess too, and then it'll be the fishing.
Yeah, that's right.
No, it's really fun. You don't always get to work with your dad every day, but flying these full planes together and fishing, life can be a lot worse.
That's got to be pretty cool. Yeah, Daniel, from your end. I mean, what if, as your dad's sitting there, what is the one thing, has he, do you take away, from him? Is there some cool things that, you know what I mean? I always think of my dad because he's getting older. He's actually in his mid 80s now, and he's having some issues. And I think about, the impact, right? Some stuff. When you're up there, you're flying, what are you thinking? Is your dad's stuff in your head you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always thinking about, I grew up, I think with my dad, we really grew up flying airplanes together. So it's kind of cool I often, like Ian, I'll be thinking about, the first time I flew with him or the last time I went to this spot with him. And, we're I think always connected through that airplane and, this area. So when we're flying along, I'm always kind of adding to those memories and thinking of the ones, that we have done as well too. And it's pretty beautiful to be up there and do that.
Yeah. Awesome. And Ors, from your end, I mean, how do you see when you look at Daniel? Is he going to be taking over the helm eventually? Do you see him as a good lead on this thing you've built?
Yeah, on one hand, I'm happy to see that both of our boys are taking over, and they seem to have gotten the passion of the flying and the fishing. And at the end of the day, you look around in the world, it's a great place to live and make a living. And we have been very blessed and happy over the years that we have been able to live up there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's so cool. I mean, and you guys have I'm just guessing, but I mean, normally we talked about climate change and stuff, but you're sitting out there in some pretty cold weather, right? During the winter. If you're sitting there in February, whatever, middle of the winter, you're not outside doing a lot. Is that kind of how that looks?
That's quite right. But you know what? It's not really any different than what you can experience in the Midwest or in other places too. You just live with it. It may last a little bit longer, the winters up north, but we have lots of clear days. And I enjoy the winter time too. It's part of the seasons. I would not want to miss it.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I think those winters are nice because you kind of relax with them a bit. And it just makes, that summer, we almost have 24 hours of daylight at the peak of it. You get so much energy out of it. But come fall time, it's nice for, earlier evenings, dark around, 6 or 7 p.m. It just really relaxed to wind down to, reflect and dream of the next year.
Yeah, that's perfect. So, and I've been thinking about this too, just, Ors, from your end, your background from Switzerland, maybe take us back there really quick. What was that like? I'm not sure when you came to Canada. Did you come straight? Like, how did that happen? Talk about your family and then how you came up here.
Well, I grew up in a small town in Switzerland called St. Gallen. It's the eastern part of Switzerland. And I made an apprenticeship as a machinist. And we had a factory-sponsored flying club there. So I had the opportunity to learn to fly when I was 17 years old. I was lucky enough to be able to fly a little bit in Europe. And then obviously the opportunities are not really there to make a living flying small airplanes. That's really what I wanted to do. So we came to Canada and had an opportunity to start a business in Fort Liard. But we needed some money, and I found a position flying a Pilatus Turboporter, a small wheel plane in North Africa for the oil companies. So I worked for 2 years there to save enough money to start the business in Fort Liard, 100 miles to the northeast of where we live now. And that's the name Liard there. That's where we started the business.
Gotcha. And do you still have your family, or is there still family in Switzerland?
My parents are still alive. I'm very fortunate, yes. So I go and visit them next week for a few days.
Amazing.
And
yeah. So you must be a little younger. How old are you now?
I'm 66 now.
Oh, yeah. Still a young buck. Yeah. So you're 66. And wow, that's amazing. So your parents are still going strong out there.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Very cool. And do you fly back, or what's that look like? You're not flying your own plane back to Switzerland, I'm guessing.
No, I mean, I would love to do one day, but no, I take the airlines. It's cheaper to use them than my own airplanes.
That's right. That's why I always wonder. But you get up there, the plane. I know they fly at whatever the miles per hour because it conserves fuel. But still, isn't fuel crazy expensive? Like the fuel that these planes are using.
The fuel is expensive, and at the end of the day, it's probably not the most, how should I say, economical way, but it's the only way to get in there. Those airplanes are not built for speed. They are built to get you there. They have a high lift capacity. They may be relatively slow, but they carry the weight and they allow you to take off and land on a short lake.
Yeah, that's it. Wow.
Not built for transatlantic flights.
No. This is good, but I think that's something maybe we could talk more about the next one about how or as you're going to put that together before you know what I mean. I'd love to hear that trip. But no, I think you guys, this has been great. First, so yeah, we talked about today about getting there, and at the start, I think Dan, you talked about the flight, the fact that coming up from Vancouver. So maybe we can hear that. Like, what is this sounds like something you guys have a unique situation where you're flying, or you own this situation where you're flying up and you don't have any issues. So talk about that. Describe how it works again and how people can get there.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is, as you probably know, is the airline deregulation. Many of the small communities in the States or even here in Canada lost the air service or a reliable air service.
Scheduled carriers.
In our case, we used to be able to get people up on a Boeing 737 into Fort Nelson. Unfortunately, the airlines quit flying into those smaller communities, and we had problems like many small lodges and far out places to get their guests up. So a few years ago, we decided to fix that problem once and for all, and we ended up buying a King Air 300, which is a great turboprop machine, which allows us to fly nonstop from Vancouver with our guests all the way up to the north.
Yeah, we don't really like, airplanes. So, having another one was not such a difficult thing to twist our arms at, right? We love having them around. We love airplanes. So it was pretty cool to add another one to the fleet.
The big problem, of course, was my wife, Daniel's mother. She was all against getting another airplane. We don't need more airplanes, we were told. Eventually, the deal was good enough to buy the airplane. She kind of relented and said, if you guys get another airplane, I get a cat. I want to have a cat.
Nice. Oh, wow. That's a pretty good deal. She gets the cat versus a plane.
We had to get a acoustic cat, so we got it.
Oh, that's funny.
Eventually, the cat ran away, but we still have the airplane, so we're in good shape.
I'm going to remember that one. That is really good. So, and this is is it called a King airplane?
Yeah, it's a King Air. It's kind of it's a pretty awesome airplane. It's an iconic
300
American. Yeah, King Air 300. It's an American-built business aircraft. It was designed. That one was designed in like the 1980s. It's built for speed. It's built for the versatility to land in remote and rugged places. Oh, wow. And this thing will do like almost 400-ish miles an hour.
Holy cow!
So it turns this vast distance. We're flying all the way across British Columbia from the coast, from Vancouver, right across the longest distance to top northeastern corner of the province.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
The speed is pretty nice to have for this. This thing is flying at jet speeds and altitude.
What's the time of it from Vancouver to landing there?
It's like 2 hours and 20 minutes.
2 hours and 20 minutes, which is a great flight.
It's faster than the airliner like that because it's a direct connection. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, people will not lose their baggage. It's all on our
Yeah, that's right. I was going to say, that's one of the things we were talking about all these trips. Baggage is always the thing. You can get
you know what? We saw that so many times or damaged stuff. And, I think Dad instilled that in my brother and I. If you do it yourself, you put your care and effort into it. It is hard to get, like an airline or an outside contractor sometimes to put that care and effort in. And I think our clientele have always valued that.
Right. Well, I'm curious because this is like one of those things. I just bought a new truck and it costs a lot of money, and I'm wondering that jet like this is what is the rough price tag? Is this thing like $1 million or more? What's
I can tell you, I don't think from the float planes to the King Air, you don't spend a day on any of our aircraft worth anything under 1.5 million.
Okay, I was gonna say that was just rough. I was figuring it was at least $1 million. It's got to be because this thing looks really cool.
Yeah, we're this is a premium trip, but the beauty of it is, you've got a guy who who built this business on these wings. Like he loves his airplanes, and we make sure we have the top of the line.
That's right. Wow. So this is great. So I don't know. So do we have a couple of stories on oars? You want to give us a story? I don't know if it's a fishing story or just some amazing story about your years up there.
Well, I mean, there's many good stories, but one of the most funniest story which I still talk about, and it happened about 35 years ago. I flew some local guys from Fort Nelson in the wintertime. They wanted to go ice fishing on a remote mountain lake. And I had a de Havilland beaver in those days on skis. And the boys kept phoning me and says, how much space do we have? How much weight can we bring? And I gave him those answers. So the prearranged day came. The boys showed up, 4 of them. And everybody had a duffel bag, and the rest was all liquids, the whiskeys and the beers. And March can still be pretty cold. Anyhow, I flew him to a remote lake, to show the lake, landed on the ice there, dropped them off. And before I left, I said, well, do you guys really have enough gear? And then the leader of that group there said, oh, yeah, we do have enough. We have a list. So he goes to his pocket and grabs the list and says, well, I'm supposed to bring an axe. So he goes to his duffel bag. He brings a hatchet out there. Well, that's probably okay. So Mike, the next guy, he had to bring a saw. So he goes to Mike. Mike goes to his duffel bag, brings a survival saw out there. Well, again, it can be cold. You have to cut lots of firewood. Anyhow, eventually they come down to Tom, and he had to bring the can opener. And Tom, he was already kind of half cut. He goes into his duffel bag, digs around in it, and pulls out an electric can opener. And it's the 80s. We don't have any cordless can openers, and I still can see that cord dangling in front of me in the middle of a remote mountain lake on the ice in March, with the boys being left alone up there fishing for a few days, and they had an electric can opener.
Oh my God! Did they survive? Did they survive the trip?
Oh, they survived the trip. Everything was fine, but it was funny just seeing that cord dangling,
Yeah.
But just say when they flew out, there was less of a liquid load.
Right. That's one of those things. Yeah, the weight, that liquid weight is heavy, isn't it?
Yeah, that's we had a guy, Paulie. He was a bit of a mentor, almost grandfather figure for me. He taught me to fly fish too, and whenever he went fishing, he had the heaviest tackle box. His tackle box was pretty much a 6-pack on its own. And then his fishing vest was the exact same thing. So, Dad or the bush pilots, they would all Paulie's gear always had to go like at the very front of the airplane or bottom of the float in those smaller airplanes we had back then. And the liquid load is always something on a fishing trip, right?
Yeah, that's good.
As you can tell, we are having fun up there.
Yeah, no, I think it is. And we've done a few of these trips, nothing kind of at the level with what you guys have going, but we're hoping to do some more of the lodge stuff, trips and things. But one of the things just on our trips that we do is, the food, the drinks, right? That's a huge part of it. Maybe just talk about that a little bit at the lodge when people are eating it. Our drinks, do you guys kind of cover everything? Food, drinks, whatever beverages they need, all that stuff?
So the alcohol is an extra there because with guys like Paulie, you never know what the measurement.
But you have it there that you're serving it.
But we have it. We got draft beer on tap. We got you can do cocktails right at the lodge in the lounge there. We got a full service resort here, so it's pretty cool.
So you have a couple good IPAs as far as on the beer end.
Yeah, we got some local IPAs. We could
Perfect.
bring it up here from Vancouver.
Good.
Really nice local brewery, Granville Island. So, and food-wise, it's pretty fun. That's actually one of my secondary or third passions.
Oh wow!
I've got a couple.
You're a foodie.
I trained as a chef actually in Switzerland, so I followed the family heritage back. So I do a lot of the menus, especially for our.
Holy cow! So what would be a Swiss kind of a menu item if we were having the first night there? What would that look like?
We start off often with like exactly that. We have a little bit of a Swiss inspiration. So one of our go-tos is kind of like to start with like a schnitzel and spätzle. That's kind of like one of the main courses. It's a breaded pork cutlet. It is deep fried. It's awesome, and we serve it with a nice mushroom gravy on top. And the spätzle it's like a pasta. It's we of course made in house, and you fry it up just like to a light crisp, sprinkle with some butter and some fresh herbs. it's a simple dish,
Sounds
but
amazing.
it's always a crowd pleaser. Sometimes, if people really like it, later on in the week, you say, well, you want to try that as a sandwich? Like the schnitzel
Sure.
sandwich is one of my favorites out in the bush too. It's nice and rich and delicious.
Yeah, gosh, schnitzel. And then what? And then breakfasts are typical breakfasts. You'll sit in there and have kind of your whatever eggs, all that.
Yeah, we have a full continental breakfast there. But what's also nice, we have this whole resort that does so much more than just a fishing. So we can really, like, if someone on a fishing trip has a wish, we can cater to that pretty good. Like, we have a lot of resources we can draw upon. The chefs can make omelets and poached eggs. Like, we really can cook up fantasies for people there. I love to do a tasting menu in the evening as well too, if people like that.
Perfect. Oh man, this all sounds good. All right, so Daniel, do you have a story you want to share before we head out of here?
Well, yeah, I so many of them. I don't know how many days we got here to speak stories.
Well, let's start with one, and then we'll follow up with the other future. Yeah,
I was actually, this is just a recent memory comes right to my head. It was a pretty funny one, and we just talked about Polly, so it just reminded me of it. I was out on we'll call it an undisclosed fly fishing film shoot, and you've probably been on a couple of those. And
oh yeah,
you need to stage a shot. You need to walk from the this time we were at the Frog River cabin, one of my favorite spots. You've probably heard it mentioned a couple times. It's high on my list of the outposts for fly fishing. That's the one. So we're there, and we have to open the cabin door, a certain way, look at the map in another way, pose and ponder and discuss.
Oh, right,
anyway,
right.
We missed the morning fishing with shoots and reshoots.
Sure.
We missed the afternoon bite. And now we're finally getting beautiful limelight. Like, this is when we want to get the shot. This is when we want to get the fish. So absolutely no pressure, right?
Right.
And well, so we go up to, the spot that I feel I know is going to produce, but man, I'm just thinking we got 15 minutes here to land.
Oh man.
And de-fish for
pressure's
the shoot,
on.
Make it happen. What can I do? And I think back to Paulie, and me and Paulie spent quite a bit of time at Frog River. I have a lot of memories fishing with him, and of course I go to one of the spots he showed me. He taught me to fly fish actually at Frog River. So I felt I was ready for it, but there's a little bit of pressure. I was like, what can I do here? And well, Paulie, I mentioned he liked his beer a little bit. So I figured, in the honor of Paulie, who's unfortunately now no longer with us, I figured we're going to crack a beer. And Paulie taught me two things about fishing. He wasn't about casting. He wasn't about technique or fancy gear or anything. For him, it was presentation and Mother Nature. You don't mess with Mother Nature and get your head out of all the complex stuff. Just get that fly on the water. Nice, easy presentation. That's going to catch you fish. All the other fancy frills, leave it behind. So, I took that first word of advice, but I was like, well, that tells me what cast I should do and what fly I should need. Like, just something simple, right? But what do I do for Mother Nature? And I was like, well, the best thing, I think Paulie would feel Mother Nature. She's a lovely woman. You need to treat her. So I figured the best thing I could give Mother Nature at this, if I don't really have much in my fishing vest, but I had a little celebratory beer. So the first sip is the best sip. So I poured a little bit in the river, in tribute, and hoped that was enough to catch my fish. And my first cast, I snagged a little a log, and I was like, oh, this. I was like, that's not great, but I reeled it in. It was a little stick in the end, and I was like, well, if that was a grayling, that something, maybe Paulie's looking out for me. He sent me something. Second cast, I catch a medium size grayling. I was like, oh, this is all right. This is all right. Okay, something's happening. Third cast, bam, 3 pound plus Arctic grayling on the fly. Film crew goes nuts. And, I tried to kind of act as if, I knew exactly that's how it's going to go down.
They got it.
We had 15 minutes to make that shot happen. And,
and 3 pounds. That is like 18 inch?
A 3+ pounder. It was really, really nice. And yeah, it was super fun. Beautiful lighting. I'm looking forward to that footage coming out, but I can't say much more about it. It's tight-lipped. I think it's going to be a spring or summer release. It's it's on the burner for a bit.
Oh, perfect. Well, we'll circle back around in the summer when it's out, and we'll definitely put a link out so people can check that out. All right, Daniel. So give us the rundown before we get out of here. I want to hear about what this looks like. If somebody wants to put together a package, just tell everybody whatever they need to know about if they want to get up to your neck of the woods.
Yeah, so start off, send me an email. You can email me at daniel@nradventures.com. Let me know what fish species you're wanting to hit, what kind of fishing you're doing, still water if you want to hit the rivers, and then I'll look into some dates to make it happen for you. It's an all-inclusive package right out of Vancouver, BC. We fly you up in, I think, that King Air my father mentioned. So this is a no-hassle holiday, pretty easy to connect with. And then you get a cabin right on the lake at the lodge's fishing resort. Daily, all meals covered. It's an all-in trip. And then, of course, you have these flyouts that, Brandon and myself and everyone was talking about. That's the joy of it. So you can, it's a week-long package. Send me an email if you're interested.
Okay. And once they do that, the next steps are you get them situated with just the details of how they get involved. And are there different packages, different options, or do you typically say, hey, you come for a week, or what do you recommend?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great question. So usually what I like to do is we base it off of, it's a very custom experience. You tell me the species you're going for. I'll look at the availability. Sometimes I might have to say, you know what? The availability, it's sold out. You're looking at, the coming year, because we take a maximum of 9 guests a week. It's pretty exclusive. It's booked out pretty quick. Then from there, we have 2 packages. They're both a week long. The classic package, which is with 4 days of guided fly-in fishing with 2 self-guided up there at the lodge. While the premier is kind of like the ultimate. It has 6 flyouts every single day flying out. It's really up to, you can mix and match. You can add a fly out onto the classic to kind of make it an in-between trip. So there's so many customization options. It's, probably best to shoot over an email and let me know what works for you.
Okay. So yeah, email's best to get started. And then you can, if you need to, grab a call and check in with everybody and fill them in on the details.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, guys, I think I think we're good. I've learned a lot, actually, and I think people are probably pretty fired up to learn more. So we're going to send them out, I guess, nradventures.com if they have questions or want to take it further.
Yeah, nradventures.com/wet fly swing, or just directly there, or, you can always drop me an email. I'm daniel@nradventures.com. Hey, I love to talk fishing. Any questions, tips about the area, and just getting out there. Always happy.
And we haven't talked about this, Daniel, this is kind of off the cuff, but is there anything special we can, if people go to that page, let's say we have the nradventures.com/wet fly swing. Is that kind of going to be kind of a welcoming them to you guys, or any thoughts? Like, this is kind of on the cuff, but
yeah, no, I'm going to have a little promo there for people, for your listeners.
Okay.
And it's probably not it's going to be up for a couple months here. And it's you'll have my direct contact address there. We'll put a little show recording link in as well as they come up. And I'll put just recent photos of the last season here, so people know what to expect, and the things we talked about. I'll have a couple links to delve a little bit deeper into the website.
Amazing. All right, Daniel, Ors, well, we'll be in touch. I'm going to work on the pronunciation of your name and your last name, so I haven't even thrown it out there. Maybe you guys give it to us. So let's hear the pronunciation of your last name, because I can't do it.
Yeah, so that's a tricky one, but it's Schildknecht. And the way I like to say it, it's shield bearer in German. And from a fly fishing standpoint, just think of us as your squires. The shield being your rod. We'll kit everyone out like fishing knights.
You're a squire, so I always think of it like the Yoda and Luke Skywalker, right? Like, that sort of, or whatever the thing is. Like, Yoda is your teacher. You're kind of like our Yoda, right, for this trip.
Yeah, I think Dad's the go-to for that. But I've been learning all my life from him, and when you spend 40 years in an area like this, you get to know the waters, and 70 different remote fly-in waters. That's not because there's 70 spots to hit. There's thousands of them up in that area, lakes and rivers combined, 70 prime time fishing areas.
Good stuff. All right, or is any last words before we get out of here?
No, I really appreciate the time and your interest, and I just would love to host you and your friends up in northern BC.
Awesome, guys. All right, appreciate it. We'll talk to you all soon.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Dave.
Take care.
That is a wrap. You can grab all of the show notes at wetflyswing.com. And please follow us on Instagram and share this episode out with someone you love. Please send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com, if you have any feedback or want us to put together an episode on this podcast for you. Check in anytime. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and would love to meet up with you on the water. We have new fly fishing schools going all year long and all around the country, so if you want to connect, let's do it right now. All right, time to get out of here. I hope you have a great evening. I hope you have a great morning or great afternoon wherever in the world you are, and I appreciate you for stopping by and checking out the show today. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.